Welcome to Season 5 of the Color Success Podcast, where we talk with guests from AAPI and ethnic minority communities and have real discussions about mental health and what success looks like. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Before we get into it, remember to subscribe to our mailing list for free at colorsuccesspodcast.com so you don't miss any updates. There, you will find our socials, YouTube channel, and all episodes on streaming platforms for great additional content. Dr. Deji Ayoade is the first African immigrant to become a nuclear missile operator in the United States Air Force and serve in 3 U.S. military branches. He's a trained veterinary surgeon, combat medic, nuclear weapon system SME, senior program analyst, and U.S. Space Force Department of Defense civilian at the Pentagon. He turned to storytelling as solace from an early life of poverty and loss. His new book is Underground, a memoir of hope, faith, and the American dream. Learn more at dejiayoade.com. Dr. Deji, thank you so much for joining me today on the show. I have heard so many wonderful things, and just reading your bio, it's like, wow, what have I been doing with my life?
That's not true. You're a doctor.
Yes, but I mean, we're talking writing a book on top of, coming from Africa and we're serving in 3 military branches. Thank you so much for your service, first of all, because I work with military veterans and I have so much respect for you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask you a really simple question off the bat. What does the American dream mean to you? I'm super sarcastic, so there you go.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people hate the idea of, people, especially immigrants, saying, they're here for the American dream and things like that, but I think that's shaped by different things and different experiences, right? So when I was growing up in Nigeria, the things that drove me, I call it an American dream because I envisioned uh, what I envisioned at the time. I was convinced in my heart that I could achieve it in America, and it didn't matter how long it took me or was going to take me. I always just dreamt of coming here and making that a reality. And for me, the first was my mom, right? I didn't like everything around me when I was growing up, the challenges that we have to face as my mom as a woman, myself as a son, the constant abuse that I probably don't have to detail here because it's in the book.
You got to buy the book, guys.
you know, but I remember, when I was turned 7 years old, I think I was old enough to understand what was going on, and then I promised my mom that, one day I'm gonna become a doctor. I'm gonna move to the United States. I'm gonna become an American citizen, and I'm gonna take care of my siblings away from here, and then we can be far from these terrible things. I still remember the lines the way I said them that morning to my mom, and I think everything that I did ever since that moment, even though I was little and I had no clue how I was going to become an American citizen. But I watched enough movies to know that that was a place where, you could set dreams and pursue them and work really hard and achieve them, but I didn't think I could attain that where I was really. And as I got older, I think I was still relentless about it until everything that I envisioned, that I pictured happening, happened to me here. I came here, I put in the time, put in the work, uh, and surprisingly, I think America has given me more than I asked for. And I think for me, number one was my mom. I wanted my mom to have the opportunity to make uh, anything out of herself, whatever she wanted to do with her life, she to be her own person and live the life she always envisioned for herself. Same for my siblings, just the opportunity, and then it's up to them after that. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that was my dream. And as soon as my mom made it here in 2013, I remember, telling myself, telling, God, that yeah, you've done it for me. This is my dream, And then everything after that was just additional challenges. I figured, man, I could do more, you know. And then so I just started aspiring. I started just going with my heart, like, okay, what do I want to do next? And I would just venture into it. And I think that I've just been on that ride. And I think the more I accomplish those things, those, expectations for myself, and I'm able to hold myself accountable to them, the more I believe that I've realized my American dream. And that started with knowing exactly what I wanted in the first place. I knew what I wanted my American dream to be. It wasn't money. It wasn't a wife, one kid, two kids, and a dog. Classic belief of what American dream is, or millions of dollars in the account. That wasn't it for me. It's more of a sense of fulfillment that I think I've realized and I'm still realizing in America.
I think that's how I would characterize it, is fulfillment, right? And you've done so much of that. And the other thing is opportunity. And I think that's very common among immigrants who come here and people who come to America, to figure out what opportunities can I actually grab onto and realize these dreams. And so I'm going to read this because I don't want to underscore how many things you've actually accomplished. Okay. So you served as a veterinary surgeon, a combat medic, nuclear weapon systems operator, senior program analyst, and U.S. Space Force Department of Defense civilian at the Pentagon. That's all in your intro. But again, what am I doing with my life? So what skills does it take, aside from tenacity and hard work, to assume these very, very complicated positions?
I don't want to say I don't. I'm very tempted to say it's very simple, but it's not.
Yeah, give yourself more credit than that.
It's not. I think it comes with one grit. I think grit is very. It's funny that I was just until I listened to a TED talk on LinkedIn one time, and there was this lady I was talking about the research they did on children, and what eventually they figured was one single attribute that they feel is the strongest recipe for success, or something like that. And she said, great. In my mind, I said, how come I never thought of this word before?
Is
And
this
I think
Dr.
it's really,
Duckworth?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, she was my algebra 2 teacher in high school. It's crazy. And she's
Are you serious?
amazing. Yes, it's a small world. And I actually read her book, and yeah, grit. Go ahead.
I mean,
It's amazing.
wow, wow. I mean, she articulated that really well. And I just never thought of that word. And I think that's what it was. When I don't like the word motivated as well. I think if you're just inspired, right, you have the drive, and you will stop at nothing, to get to your goals without compromising your integrity. Um, or in the military, to really thrive, I think number one, besides grit, it's selflessness. If you let you think about yourself and the people that you're serving, the people, uh, everybody else, in my opinion, I think that's number one. The second is integrity. I think integrity will take you far, because you can channel it into anything and everything you do. And it's very easy when you get into the toughest of situations to get compromised and start just looking for a shortcut, right? So I think for me, I've never been a fan of taking a shortcut to anything. I'm never scared of doing the work. So even when I left veterinary practice and I knew I was venturing into an entirely different world of military, uh, I remember when I was in full camp, because I had to enlist before I had the commission, because I didn't have citizenship at first.
Yeah.
And there were times when I think in boot camp, I asked myself, what am I doing here? I said, wow. I said, do I have to put myself through this? And then in my mind, I told myself that I'm never the person that starts something and never finish it. And I knew I was in a journey to something, and I could never, ever let my pride or anything hold me back. Instead, I think I told myself, I remember in training, that I hold myself accountable to the outcome of everything that I'm going to put myself into. And I'm going to throw everything, every inch of me into whatever I'm going to do in the Navy. And I'm just going to see what happens. Yeah, I'm not going to have any regrets about living practice at the time because I can always go back to practice. You know, when you have your license, you have it. When you're a medical doctor, you have that ready. But I've never been in the military. I've never been in combat medic. You know, when I got in the Air Force, and Air Force decided, yeah, we throw it in nuclear weapons or nuclear missiles missile operations, and a lot of the office, senior officers were like, let's put him in public health. This guy already has a DVM. We don't have to train him. Like, let him, you know. And it was between them. I didn't even care. I was just ready. So like, no, just this is new. I've never done it before. It sounds exciting. So I think if we constantly remind ourselves that we have just one life to live, there's nothing holding us back. Seriously. I mean, there are life situations that hold us back from things, but if you can actually ask yourself, what's really holding me back? Are those excuses or those are, I mean, those are physical limitations or, I think if we become honest with ourselves, you know, I think all it takes is that, it's summary grit. I just told that from, that lady, the lady we just talked about, and your former teacher, and but I also believe that integrity, uh, selflessness, and an honor play a huge role in succeeding in the military generally.
So I'm a big person on how to. So you clearly have been able to maintain your integrity during these really difficult situations. And I mean, it's no secret. The world and even American society have a lot of things that are going on right now that are very, very difficult. That's an understatement. You've been through difficult things in your life. So, how have you been able to maintain your integrity? How can other people do that when everything seems to be going down the garbage chute?
That's a really good question. I think the first is you have. I actually wrote an article about that, uh, but I just have to remember what I wrote. So, but it won't come exactly the way I wrote it. But um, I think one thing my dad used to say when I was alive, he used to tell us that you need, if you know where you're coming from, that you may not know where you're going, but you know where you're coming from.
Mm.
That you don't ever uh, compromise yourself. You don't ever try to achieve anything by taking a shortcut. And it would say things like that, even though the friendship between us when I was growing up wasn't the best, but it was filled with wisdom. And I think if you can, uh, if you can tell yourself that the way forward. So so I think if you can remember that, like for me, I knew how far I came. I knew the things I'd been through, and I was convinced in my heart that the very few other situations that I will experience, especially after I came here. So if anything happened to me, in my mind, I think about why they're happening to me and what lessons I need to learn from those things, right? With the understanding that my life cannot be meaningful without challenges.
Mm.
And if I allow those challenges to happen, to play out the way they're supposed to, and I prepare myself and work really hard to confront those challenges, my fears, and overcome them, I can look back and tell myself that I actually overcame that. I didn't cheat. I didn't do it. I didn't take any shortcut. I walked through it and I succeeded. It gives you a level of confidence that you can buy, that also prepares you for the next challenge. So I think if we can just understand and accept that our lives are going to be filled with challenges, the problems are always going to be there. We're always going to face them. Then we have no reason to um, compromise ourselves. You know, we only here on earth for a while, for as long as we're able to. And then everything that's going to happen is an opportunity to shine, uh, to learn something about ourselves, and in fact, contribute something before we leave this earth. So I think thinking about it that way really helps with, um, holding on tight to your integrity and knowing that if you can stick with it in everything you do, you will move forward. It's just, I think it's like a natural law, right? You know how you you have you meet someone and you work together, and then you did something really nice for them, and then 20 years later you run into them again, and they're in a position to help you, or you're in a position to help them. You say, "Oh my God, thank God I didn't mess this up," you know, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh," uh, and that's how I see life. It's a really small place. Yeah.
Yeah. And we just, confirmed that when you were talking about Dr. Duckworth. So I think that's the next book. Charlie, are you listening? And he will listen, is that Wise Words from Dr. Deji. There's the title right there. Um, and I think that there's this healthy dose of optimism that you're talking about is what I was thinking when you were describing that piece, because integrity is huge. And there's this optimism that needs to happen to say, you know what, I'm going to make it through. There's going to be a silver lining in these situations. And I'm going to try my best to make sure that that happens. So shifting gears just a teeny bit, you talked about missile operation, and you're the first African immigrant to be a missile operator. And what an honor. And also, I imagine that that is a taxing honor, so to speak, when you are the first to do something, or someone who's underrepresented doing something. What was your experience like?
So that's a very good point there. So if you look at my book, right, my introduction or my back of my book, I think I had, the first uh, African immigrant to operate the U.S. nuclear weapons, right, and serving 3 military services. Now, people told me, right, the major men because they had never seen someone like me before, and doing that and things like that. But I never officially confirmed. So that's why we have to tie that to my military experience, right? And put that together as, the first. So I haven't seen any or heard of any African immigrant before me. But if that were the case, sorry, but to the person. But so far, I've asked a lot of experienced missileers before I came on, and I said, dude, we haven't seen an American immigrant here. But surprisingly, after I left, I think I know two now. One from Senegal, one from Nigeria, also something like that. Uh, but I realized I didn't know. I think the first time that occurred to me was when I was in training, when one of the officers mentioned that, and it was the way they kind of reacted or responded to me when they saw me. I opened my mouth and then they could hear the accent, right? I mean, they didn't have to see me. Just my name alone gave me away. But then when I opened my mouth, they knew I wasn't born here. And they they were just shocked. And I think it took some time for some of them to actually come out like, okay, how did you get here?
Mm.
And then they're like, you're a doctor, when they found that. So this is even more complicated. Like, why
My
you can't
brain
make
can't compute this.
yes. And then, but talk about the challenges. Uh, when you go through medical training, the way your brain gets wired is sort of different. And it's wired in such a way that a lot of other things, and I'm not trying to generalize this, right? A lot of
Sure.
other things might come to you more easily depending on what it is. Now, as a nuclear uh, weapon officer, right? As a nuclear officer, there's a part of it that naturally, because of the attention to detail when you're doing surgeries and things like that, right? It just came to me naturally. I could analyze things so easily. and just understand them on the spot, even though I wasn't a nuclear engineer.
Mhm.
Uh, and so the part of training wasn't a challenge at all. But I think the most challenging part of being a nuclear officer was when I was actually operating in, during my ops time, when, I was on crew with some people that, probably just met an immigrant for the first time. It was different. Sometimes, I would be on the phone and I'm talking to someone and, on a plane somewhere, or I'm talking to someone in a different capsule and they're shocked to hear a different accent on the phone, that sounds some of them couldn't even place it if it was African or somewhere else because, a lot of those guys have never even left the country before, or they've just been to Middle East. So I think for me, it was really exciting. I felt very special because it was just, you don't run into African in a field like that in the Air Force every day. And my career field were mostly officers, right? Very rarely you find enlisted folks. And then what it also exposed me quickly to senior leadership in the military. Uh, and because of the sensitive nature of our job, right? The level of classification, the
Mhm.
fact that what we do quickly translates to what the president cares about day in, day out, right? So uh, you get visibility there, but that also challenges you that, okay, how do I comport myself? How
Yeah.
do I execute that? How do I talk in this meeting? And that really came into play when I joined the ranks of senior leaders in the Pentagon. It was just a different place, and I had to learn quickly because one thing you don't want to do is let what's different about you work against you. You have to quickly figure out your uniqueness and you being the first to a lot of people, the way they see you, right? And try to use that as a plus, as something good for the service. And then service really wants even more of that. So by the time I moved from Navy to the Air Force and then transitioned to Space Force as a civilian, it was it was interesting, that this guy had done nuclear weapons, now he's in space, and
Mhm.
uh, space was opposite though. I saw a lot of African immigrants in space. So
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. A lot of them were born here. I don't want to say, okay, I'm wrong. A lot of them came here really young.
Uh-huh.
So they grew up here. It wasn't like they came here when I was already 28. Uh, a lot of them probably came here when they were like 4 or 5 or something like that. But I've seen one or two, like one or two, maybe 4 or 5, that actually they enlisted and then they commissioned and became space officers. So I don't know how, but I've seen last names from Nigeria in that career field that I've seen everywhere, anywhere else.
Wow.
Yeah, but on the space staff that's with civilian at the headquarters space, right? I was the first um, immigrant to be on that space staff across, that rank. And currently, I don't know any other. I see some now. I see some immigrant last names, in some emails. Like, oh, I see that might be a spouse to a Nigerian person or whatever. But it's kind of cool now that I'm beginning to see that. But when we started Space Force, in it was different, you know.
I sense that you're very careful with your words, but I'm kind of straight talk. So, I mean, did you experience any discrimination while you were there?
Um, I think it's okay. So there's a combination of being an immigrant, being black, having an accent that's not common in the US, right? Uh, so there's no escape road for you. You one way or the other, you experience something funny. It's just up to you how you deal with it. I'm not gonna lie to you. When I was new in the US, I was really naive about things like that. That I didn't even know when people were doing it, and I think it was good because I didn't have to experience some negativities, and the people just doing things and just stressing themselves out. I had no clue what was going on. I give another instance with it when I first showed up to. So it's a double-edged sword. So let me backtrack quickly. In the Navy, my second day in training, the chief came in and yelled my name. He screamed my name, and I was so scared. I said, God, what did I do? It's just my second day in training. Ayoade, what are you doing here? And I told him, I'm here to train. He said, no, you have a doctorate and a master's. What are you doing here? You should have commissioned. And I told him, well, I'm permanent resident. He said, oh, I've seen bachelor's degrees and stuff, but I've never seen a doctor do that before, enlist and then try to commission. He said, okay, you know what? Because we're at war then. So it turns out they were naturalizing folks in boot camp. So he said, okay, remind me tomorrow. I'm going to get you the naturalization forms and the materials to study. You have to naturalize before you leave the boot camp. That's how I naturalized before I left Navy boot camp.
Wow.
Now, that helped me, right? But when I showed up to ops, training and ops on the nuclear side, yeah, I experienced someone who nearly sabotaged me because he didn't like the way I sounded. And the worst part was, again, I was so naive that I didn't read between the lines what was going on. I grew up in Nigeria, and it took me quite longer to kind of get the nuances, right? There were times when it was my Caucasian friends that probably they would notice stuff and then they would defend me. And I'm trying to understand why they defended me. And then they pull me over and tell me, no, this is what this person is trying to do to you. I said, oh, I didn't catch that. But when I caught it, though, it was so obvious that I knew that was happening, in the nuclear field. And, I pulled that officer aside. It's in my book. And I had a one-on-one with confrontation with him. It's like, this is what you're doing. I know what you're doing. I understand it. But this is how it's not, here's how it's not going to benefit you now and long term in your military career. And that's if you have a long military career. I said, you will not thrive if you keep this up because more people like me are coming. I'm just the first. And it's funny, 3 months later, he got a piece of, I don't know, he did something else, somebody else, just the same way I predicted to him and kicked him out of the squadron. So uh, those things happen, and today I'm not going to say that they don't happen, even as I work in the Pentagon.
Yeah.
You just have to be smart about things like that. You figure out how to keep people with kindness and you figure out how to avoid some things and you figure out how to put people aside and let them know uh, we are both human beings and we are in pursuit of our happinesses, both of us. You have your goals, I have mine. I'm a human being like you. Don't read anything, don't read into it about, don't read anything special to the way I sound or the way I look. You know, uh, I'm just a human being, just like you. And I think sometimes coming to having conversations like that has really helped me. And I'll conclude by telling you that one thing that I did for the first time that has really helped me, I remember in Pentagon was, I read my surrounding and I understand quickly that, these folks I'm working with, I do not think they understand me. And then I pulled them over one day, and about four of them said, I got to talk to you all. If I talk and sound like this is not what I imply, this is what I mean. If my face, happens to kind of, if I have a straight face or whatever, I'm thinking, I'm not angry. If I'm speaking, if I get excited, my accent tends to be thicker and stronger. It doesn't mean I'm angry. I started telling them stuff, stuff like that. And I need your help to get good at my job because you've been here longer than I have, and they all just kind of melted. And, one of them said, man, I haven't seen this level of humility ever from anyone before. And he said, man, you're right, dude. I've never worked with another African immigrant before. And I've been struggling to understand you, and so things like that help.
I mean, what you're talking about is facilitating understanding. And I don't think a lot of people respond in that way. So that's a huge tool to be able to not humiliate someone in public for, offending you, but pulling them aside to really have these real conversations. And I think people appreciate that more than many people think, because they think that they're against them. And I think when you're talking with people about ways that you can collaborate on a shared goal, that it's just really powerful.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I know I'm probably taking more of your time now, but um, remember that officer I told you that nearly sabotaged me?
Yes.
I asked him a question when I had that 1 hour conversation with him. I told him, I don't know, 1 or 2 hours. I was there with him for a long time. I asked him, do you know how many accents we have in this quadrant? And then he said, no one's counting, I just know you, your accent. you know. I said, well, 22, 22. And he looked at me weird, like, like how did you know that? I said, because the same way, the same effort that it probably takes you to listen to me and understand what I'm saying clearly is the same effort I have to put into deciphering each one of your accents. You all sound different. Most of it came from somewhere else. That guy's from Alabama. These other guys from Boston. That's why I know accents really well.
They are very, very distinct.
Yes, I said, that guy's from New York. I said, do you know I really have to pay attention and understand it? I understand you all differently. At no point in time, have I ever pointed fingers at anyone in this quadrant, that the reason why I do not understand them is because of the way they sounded. I always ask myself, why am I not understanding this person? And very humbly ask them to repeat themselves if I don't understand them, or I'll figure it out. So please don't take the way I sound for a weakness.
Yeah.
All right. Or as an operational problem. If anything, I think it brings strength to us as a team, stuff like that.
So poetry, writing has been a huge outlet for you to communicate your stories and all of the experiences that you've had. How have you used it to communicate your messages, and what messages are you hoping people take away from your books?
Let me answer that question by telling a quick story. 2 years ago, I have one brother in Nigeria. He called me. He was moving my mom's stuff out of my dad's house. And then he said, I'm reading a book, and you wrote a whole bunch of things in this book when you were 8 years old, because he saw the year you know, when I had written stuff in that book. It's like, we used to call them two Bs or whatever we call them back home in Nigeria. So I'm calling you because I started crying when I started reading the things you wrote in that book. I said, why? He said, for an 8-year-old kid, the things you wrote were too deep. You were sad, and you were just a really sad little kid. And I was just wondering why you wrote those things. And then I thought back about it. I didn't tell him this, but I just told him, wow, keep that book for me. Maybe one day when I come to Nigeria, when you come here, you bring it. I'd like to go over that. And then I remember that it's true. I used to lock myself up in my mom's room and write about what I wished, where I wished, how I wished we lived at the time, what I wish could happen to my mom, what better life I wished for her, my siblings, how I wish they could do something better with themselves, and how I wish my dad was different, and how I wish I was in the United States and achieve something as great as Rocky Balboa or something, like from the movies I've seen, And I think I carried that with me, even though I forgot about writing those stories at the time about, how sad I was and how I wanted things to be different. And I think at the end of my high school, I think it was my last year in high school, going to college, that was when I started keeping account of things I wrote, because my cousin made me do it. He would read them, and then he said, you need to keep them, because you just write them and throw them away. So I started keeping them in a book, you know, And when I felt that way, that frustration, even when I was in college, when I ate once a day or I didn't have any food like in 2 days and I'm just drinking water because I didn't want to drop out of school, I would do that. I wrote. And the reason why I wrote was because number one, it was a sort of healing process for me, one.
Yeah.
And then two, it gave me hope that if I could write those things, that means I'm envisioning them and I could work towards them and I could hold myself accountable because I write those things down. I'll still keep notes in my wallet, you know. And the way that gave me strength, hope, but most importantly, the faith that the things I imagined in my mind, the things I prayed about, they would come to pass, they would happen. I just have to keep working towards it. I believe strongly that I could pass that on to people and people could get that from what I write. And that was one of the main reasons why that book became a book because it was supposed to be a record for my children, not a book, until, I know that when this has a potential to change other people's views and encourage people that were in my shoes back then. And that's why I titled it A Memoir of Hope, Faith, and American Dream. And that's what drives me when I write. Unfortunately, I'm so busy at work these days. I've not written much, but when I do, though, it comes from a place of hope, faith, and uh, just the things the things I experienced, and envision a vision for a better future that I think other people can see, and hopefully, the way I try to pay that forward, they're able to do that as well. If they start seeing that and start living their lives uh, the way they really want to do that, and then something good happens, and then they can do the same thing for other people they think need, an inspiration like that.
Well, it's so funny because I have a stack of my journals here as well. And, the reason why Dr. Deji and I even connected was because we're part of the Munn Avenue Press family. And so we're just super excited to continue to share the content. And I'm currently in the editing phase of my book, which is probably the most painful, but hopefully that will be out soon. So tell us where we can find all your books, all your blogs, and people can connect with you.
Yeah, I think so. There's a one-stop shop for everything. My website, Deji Ayoade, singleword.com. This is my articles, my podcasts, link to my books. My books are on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and it's everywhere. It's funny when I say it's everywhere, but really it is because you can just Google my name and my book title, Deji Ayoade Underground, on Google, and then you just see it everywhere. And then I'm on Twitter. I'm on as Deji Ayoade, single word. Same as no, on Facebook, separate words, Deji Ayoade. And then Instagram as the memoir blogger, but Deji Ayoade as well. So you can follow me on any of those platforms, but I usually encourage folks to go through my website. I think it's easier to get everything else from there.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your wise words.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wang. I feel so blessed uh, to have this opportunity, to have this conversation with you. It's really good.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Remember to support us for free by subscribing to our mailing list at colorsuccesspodcast.com. There, you will find our socials, YouTube channel, and all episodes on streaming platforms for great additional content. As Rob Heaps from Partner Track said, success is contagious, so come catch it.